When I played that security footage in the courtroom, the footage of them in my bed in my house, spending my money while I was getting shot at 7,000 miles away, I watched my wife's face go from confident to shattered in about 3 seconds. Her lawyer actually put his head in his hands. Welcome to Cheating Story Exposed. Real stories, real justice, no sugarcoating. You know what? I notice many of you watching haven't hit that subscribe button yet. Here's the thing, we drop stories like this every single day. Stories about people who got played, got smart, and got even. If you want to see how these situations really end, subscribe now and turn on notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. My name is Garrett Mitchell, I'm 42, and I spent 16 years in the Army before I took a civilian contracting position. This story starts 3 years ago when I thought I had everything figured out. I was wrong about a lot of things, but I learned fast and I learned thoroughly. I met Veronica at a charity event for veteran families. She worked in hospital administration, seemed grounded, understood the military lifestyle because her father had been Navy. We dated for a year, got married, bought a house in a good neighborhood outside Fort Bragg. On paper, everything looked solid. The problems started small, little comments about my deployments, how her friends' husbands had normal jobs, how she was always alone at events. I chalked it up to adjustment period stuff. First marriage for both of us, both in our late 30s, both set in our ways. I figured we'd work through it. Then I got notified about a 6-month deployment to a training facility in the Middle East. Not combat exactly, but not safe either. Contractor work pays well because sometimes you're in the line of fire even when you're technically not military anymore. Veronica didn't take it well. We had a huge fight the week before I left. She apologized the day I deployed, crying, saying she was scared, that she loved me, that she'd wait. I believed her. I sent money home every 2 weeks like clockwork. My salary was good and I wanted her comfortable. The house payment, her car payment, credit cards, spending money. I set up automatic transfers for everything. About 2 months in, I started noticing weird things during our video calls. The living room furniture was rearranged. New artwork on the walls. She'd gotten a new haircut, new clothes, seemed happier than I'd seen her in months. I asked about it. She said she was just keeping busy, redecorating, taking care of herself. Seemed reasonable. Then one of our video calls got interrupted. She said she had to go, someone was at the door, but before she hung up I heard a man's voice in the background, not at the door, in the house. She said it was a contractor fixing the sink, at 8 p.m. on a Friday. I'm not an idiot, but I also wasn't jumping to conclusions yet. I called my buddy Trevor, who lived 20 minutes from my house. Asked him to drive by when he had a chance, just check on things. Trevor's solid former Ranger owns a security company now. He went by that weekend. He called me on a secure line. There was a BMW parked in my driveway, not Veronica's car. He watched for an hour, saw lights on in the house, movement, but nobody came out. He took photos of the license plate. I had him run the plate through his company's database. Came back registered to a guy named Blake Donovan, 34, worked in pharmaceutical sales. No criminal record, but that didn't matter. What mattered was his car was in my driveway while I was overseas. That's when I stopped reacting and started planning. I've been trained in strategy my entire adult life. You don't win fights by losing your temper. You win by gathering intelligence, building a plan, and executing with precision. I contacted another buddy who still worked security contracts. Asked him about home surveillance systems I could access remotely. He set me up with a guy who specialized in discrete installations. I told Veronica I was sending a security team to install cameras around the exterior of the house because there'd been break-ins in the neighborhood. She didn't object. Why would she? She thought they were only outside. What she didn't know was my guy installed 4 interior cameras. One in the living room, one in the kitchen, one in the hallway, and one in the master bedroom. Hidden in smoke detectors, air vents, picture frames. Professional-grade, cloud-based storage, accessible from anywhere in the world. I waited 3 days after installation to check the footage. I needed to be mentally prepared for whatever I was going to see. When I finally logged in, I almost wished I hadn't. Blake Donovan wasn't just visiting. He was living there, in my house, sleeping in my bed, eating food I paid for. Wearing a bathrobe that looked suspiciously like the one I'd left hanging in the bathroom. The footage showed everything. Them cooking dinner together, watching TV on my couch, laughing, kissing, And yes, exactly what you're thinking multiple times in multiple rooms. I watched Veronica, my wife, the woman who cried when I deployed, run her hands through this guy's hair and tell him she wished I'd never come back. That hit different than the physical stuff. The physical betrayal was enraging. The emotional betrayal was clarifying. It told me exactly what I was dealing with. I spent the next week documenting everything. Timestamps, screenshots, video clips. I organized it all in a secure folder. Then I started digging into Blake Donovan's life. Turns out pharmaceutical sales guy was doing pretty well for himself. Nice car, nice apartment. He apparently wasn't using any more active social media showing him at expensive restaurants and clubs. But here's what was interesting. He wasn't posting any of that current stuff. His last Instagram post was from 2 months ago, right around when he apparently moved into my house. I checked our joint bank account. Veronica had been spending money like crazy. Restaurants, bars, shopping, entertainment. Hundreds of dollars a week beyond her normal spending. My money, funding her affair. I called Trevor again, asked him to do more detailed surveillance. He agreed immediately. Over the next 2 weeks, Trevor documented Blake's car at my house every single night. He followed Blake during the day. Guy would leave my house in the morning, go to his sales calls, come back to my house in the evening. He'd essentially abandoned his apartment and moved in full time. That's when I made the decision to come home early. I had 3 months left on my contract, but I talked to my supervisor. Told him I had a family emergency. Given my track record and the fact that I was technically ahead on all my projects, they let me go with full pay and a clean exit. But I didn't tell Veronica I was coming home. I told her the deployment got extended another 2 months. She actually seemed happy about it. Said it meant more money. More time for her and Blake is what she really meant. Before I left the Middle East, I contacted a divorce attorney in North Carolina. Not just any attorney, a former JAG officer who specialized in military divorces and understood exactly what I was dealing with. Her name was Patricia Vance, and when I sent her the evidence I'd compiled, she called me within an hour. She said, and I quote, "Mr. Mitchell, this is the most documented case of infidelity I've ever seen. We're not just getting you a divorce, we're getting you everything." Patricia walked me through exactly what we needed. First, she filed for immediate separation of assets. Second, she prepared a motion to freeze our joint accounts. Third, she drafted an emergency order for me to take immediate possession of the marital home. The evidence was so overwhelming that she was confident we'd get everything approved before Veronica even knew what hit. I flew back to the States on a Tuesday, landed in North Carolina Wednesday morning, went straight to Patricia's office. We spent 6 hours going through every piece of evidence, every financial record, every text message I'd managed to retrieve from our phone records. By the end of the day, we had a court date scheduled for Friday morning, emergency hearing based on the circumstances. The judge who reviewed the preliminary evidence was a veteran himself. Patricia knew this, which is why she'd requested his docket. When he saw the documentation, the videos, the financial records, the fact that another man was living in a home being paid for by a deployed service member, he approved everything immediately. Temporary orders granting me sole possession of the house, freezing Veronica's access to our joint accounts, and setting a fast-track divorce hearing. Thursday evening, I parked down the street from my house. Blake's BMW was in the driveway. Lights were on. I could see them through the window, sitting on my couch, drinking wine, completely comfortable, completely unaware that their entire world was about to detonate. I waited until Friday morning. I wanted them comfortable. I wanted them unprepared. At 9 a.m., I pulled into my driveway in a rental car. I had the court orders in a folder. I had Trevor with me as a witness and for security. I had Patricia on speed dial. I used my key and walked into my house. They were in the kitchen. Blake was making coffee in my coffee maker. Veronica was at the table in a robe, scrolling through her phone. They both froze when they saw me. Veronica went white, actually stumbled backward. Blake just stood there holding a coffee mug with a stupid, confused expression on his face. I didn't yell, didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. I set my folder on the counter and said, "You have 30 minutes to get out of my house." Veronica found her voice, started with the usual script. It wasn't what it looked like. Blake was just a friend helping her. They weren't doing anything wrong. I almost laughed. I opened the folder, pulled out printouts of screenshots from the security footage, laid them on the counter, time-stamped images of them in my bed, in my shower, on my couch. Everywhere, Veronica's face went from white to red. She started crying, which I expected. Started with apologies, which I also expected. Said she loved me, that she'd made a mistake, that we could work through this. Blake, to his credit, had enough sense to stay quiet. I pulled out the court orders, showed them the judge's signature. Sole possession of the marital home granted to me. Joint accounts frozen. Emergency divorce proceedings initiated. She had 30 minutes to take her immediate personal belongings and leave. Anything she left behind would be inventoried and could be retrieved through her attorney. That's when she got angry. Started yelling about how this was her house too, how I couldn't just kick her out, how she had rights. I let her finish. Then I pointed to the paragraph in the order that explained exactly how I could kick her out and exactly what rights she'd forfeited by moving her lover into the marital home while her husband was deployed. Blake finally spoke up. Said he didn't want any trouble, started gathering his things. Smart move. Veronica turned on him, screaming about how he couldn't just leave her. That was enlightening. Apparently they'd been making long-term plans. I called Patricia, put her on speaker. She introduced herself to Veronica as my attorney and calmly explained that any further resistance to the court order would result in immediate involvement of law enforcement and potential contempt charges. She suggested compliance would be in Veronica's best interest. Trevor, who'd been standing quietly by the door, stepped forward. He's 6'4" and built like exactly what he is, former Special Forces. His presence had a clarifying effect on the situation. They packed. Veronica was crying, throwing things into suitcases, cursing me, cursing Blake, cursing the situation. Blake was quiet, efficient, clearly just wanting to be gone. 28 minutes after I'd walked in, they walked out. Blake got in his BMW. Veronica got in her car. They both left. I stood in my house, my quiet, empty house, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. First phase complete. The divorce hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later, but Patricia had been busy. She'd filed for fault-based divorce on grounds of adultery. In North Carolina, that matters. It affects property division, it affects alimony, it affects everything. Veronica hired an attorney. Some guy named Marshall Kent, who apparently had a reputation for getting good settlements for wives in military divorces. He clearly hadn't looked at the evidence before taking the case. The discovery phase was brutal for them. Patricia requested everything. Phone records, credit card statements, social media messages, email correspondence. And because we had the video evidence, Veronica couldn't deny anything. Her attorney tried to argue that my surveillance was illegal. Judge shut that down immediately. Installing security cameras in your own home isn't illegal. The fact that they caught a crime in progress isn't my problem. We found out Blake had been fired from his pharmaceutical job about a week after I came home. Apparently his sales numbers had been tanking for months because he'd been too busy playing house to actually work. His company had been investigating him, and when they found out about the situation, they cut him loose. Professional reputation destroyed. Veronica had tried to go back to her hospital administration job, but someone there had seen her social media or heard about the situation, and suddenly her work environment got very uncomfortable. She ended up resigning. So now she had no job and no income. During depositions, Patricia destroyed them. She went through every purchase Veronica had made on our joint account, every dinner with Blake, every shopping trip, every bottle of wine. Thousands of dollars of my money spent on her affair. The judge's face during those depositions told me everything I needed to know about how this was going to end. Blake had to give a deposition, too. Patricia subpoenaed him as a third party. He tried to plead the fifth, but the judge wasn't having it. This was civil court, not criminal. Blake admitted to the affair. Admitted to living in the house. Admitted that he knew I was deployed and that I was paying for everything. His attorney looked like he wanted to disappear. Then Patricia dropped the nuclear option. She'd been coordinating with a separate attorney to file a civil suit against Blake for alienation of affection. North Carolina is one of the few states where you can still sue your spouse's affair partner for destroying your marriage. The suit was for $100,000 in damages. Blake's attorney tried to argue that was excessive. Patricia pulled out her evidence folder, showed the financial damage to my mental health during and after deployment, showed the documented betrayal, showed Blake's knowing participation in an ongoing affair with a married woman whose husband was serving overseas. The judge let the suit proceed. The final divorce hearing was almost anticlimactic. Veronica's attorney tried to argue for a 50-50 split of assets and spousal support. Patricia presented our evidence, the videos, the financial records, The timeline showing Veronica had been planning this affair and had moved Blake in within weeks of my deployment. The judge took about 15 minutes to deliberate. He granted me full ownership of the house. He granted me full ownership of both vehicles. He split the remaining liquid assets 60-40 in my favor. He denied any spousal support to Veronica. And he put in the official record that the cause of the divorce was Veronica's adultery and financial misconduct during my deployment. Veronica cried through the whole thing. Her attorney looked defeated. My attorney looked satisfied. I felt vindicated. The alienation of affection suit against Blake settled out of court 2 months later. His parents paid $75,000 to make it go away. Blake apparently had to borrow money from them because he was broke after losing his job and having to find a new apartment. I didn't feel bad for him. Veronica tried to reach out a few times after everything was finalized. Text messages saying she was sorry, that she'd made a terrible mistake, that she missed me. I blocked her number. She tried through email. I set up a filter. She tried through social media. I'd already deleted all my accounts during the deployment for security reasons and never reactivated them. 6 months after the divorce was final, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Veronica and Blake had broken up. Apparently, when the money dried up and the excitement of their forbidden affair turned into the reality of being broke and unemployed together, the relationship fell apart. Shocking absolutely no one. I sold the house. Too many bad memories. Bought a smaller place closer to the security consulting firm I'd started working with after I came back. Started building a new life that didn't include any of the baggage from that marriage. People ask me if I have regrets. About the marriage, yes. I should have seen the signs earlier, should have been more careful about who I trusted. But about how I handled the situation once I knew, no regrets at all. I could have come home raging and confrontational, could have started a physical fight with Blake, could have done a lot of things that would have made me feel better in the moment but would have destroyed my case and possibly got me arrested. Instead, I used my training, gathered intelligence, built a strategy, executed with precision. That's the lesson I took from all of this. When someone betrays you, emotion is the enemy. Anger feels good, but it doesn't win. What wins is being smarter, being more prepared, and being willing to do the work that your opponent isn't willing to do. I spent months documenting everything while I was still deployed. While Veronica and Blake were comfortable and careless, I was building an airtight case. While they were spending my money and living in my house, I was preparing legal strategies with one of the best divorce attorneys in the state. By the time I walked through that door, they'd already lost. They just didn't know it yet. The court system worked exactly the way it's supposed to work when you have overwhelming evidence and proper legal representation. The judge saw what happened. He saw a service member deployed overseas while his spouse betrayed him in the worst possible way. He saw the financial misconduct. He saw the complete lack of remorse until consequences arrived, and he ruled accordingly. I'm not going to pretend this didn't affect me. It did. Finding out your wife has been living with another man while you're deployed messes with your head. There were nights I couldn't sleep. Days where I questioned everything about my judgment and my ability to trust people. That's normal. That's human. But I didn't let it destroy me. I channeled it into action. I used the anger as fuel for the work I needed to do to protect myself legally and financially. And once the legal battle was over, I found a good therapist who specialized in veteran issues and worked through the emotional damage with a professional instead of trying to carry it alone. 3 years later, I'm in a good place. I've got a career I enjoy, working security consulting for a firm that values my skills. I've got a house I actually like, in a neighborhood where I know my neighbors and nobody's stabbing me in the back. I've gone on some dates, nothing serious yet, but I'm not closed off to the possibility of trying again. Just a lot more careful. About who I let into my life. I heard recently that Veronica had moved back in with her parents. She's working retail somewhere, trying to rebuild her life from scratch. Blake is apparently working at a different pharmaceutical company in a different city, starting over at a much lower level than where he was before everything imploded. I don't follow their lives actively. Don't care enough to. But mutual acquaintances sometimes mention things, and I listen without comment. The house I bought after selling the marital home is about half the size but twice as comfortable. It's mine. Nobody else has ever lived there. No bad memories attached to any room. I furnished it exactly how I wanted it, decorated it to my taste, and built a space that feels like an actual home instead of a stage set for someone else's lies. Work is good. The security firm I joined does consulting for corporate clients and some government contract work. It uses my military experience without requiring deployments. I travel sometimes, but it's short trips and I'm home regularly. The pay is solid and I'm building toward a partnership stake in the company. The guys I work with are former military, law enforcement, intelligence. We speak the same language. There's trust there. I reconnected with some old army buddies I'd lost touch with during the marriage. Veronica had never liked them much, always made plans during times when they wanted to meet up, so I'd gradually drifted away from those friendships. Getting those back has been good. Monthly poker games, occasional fishing trips, guys who understand the life and don't judge. My family knew everything that happened and they were supportive throughout. My parents are both gone now, but my sister and her family have been solid. My nephew is 17, and he asks me questions about military service, about handling difficult situations, about being a man of integrity. I try to give him honest answers without making myself sound like a hero. I'm just a guy who got dealt a bad situation and handled it the way I was trained to handle problems. Dating has been interesting. I'm honest with women I meet about what happened. Not on the first date, but if things progress, I tell them. Some of them get uncomfortable and disappear, which is fine. If they can't handle the reality of what I went through, they're not right for me anyway. Others have been understanding, even supportive. One woman I dated for a few months was a divorced teacher who'd gone through her own betrayal situation. We understood each other, but ultimately we weren't compatible long-term for other reasons. We ended things amicably, and I consider that a win. Healthy ending to a relationship is something I didn't experience with Veronica. The video evidence I gathered is long deleted. Once the legal proceedings were over and all appeals were exhausted, I destroyed every copy. I didn't need it anymore, and keeping it felt like holding on to toxicity I didn't want in my life. The court records are sealed, which was something Patricia negotiated as part of the final settlement. Veronica wanted privacy, and I didn't care about public humiliation. I cared about justice and moving on. I think about how differently this could have gone if I'd handled it emotionally instead of strategically, if I'd confronted them without evidence, if I'd gotten physical. If I'd tried to work through it because I was afraid of divorce or embarrassed about being cheated on. Any of those paths would have left me worse off. Potentially with a criminal record, definitely without my assets, probably still married to someone who'd proven she couldn't be trusted. Instead, I used my training. I gathered intelligence. I built a case. I executed the plan. I won decisively. And then I moved on with my life. That's what I want people to understand from this story. Betrayal is going to hurt. It's supposed to hurt. Someone you trusted violated that trust in fundamental way. You're allowed to feel angry, sad, betrayed, all of it, but you can't live there. You can't make decisions from that emotional space. You have to acknowledge the emotions, then set them aside and think strategically. What do you need to protect yourself? What evidence do you need? What legal steps do you need to take? What professional help do you need to hire? Those are the questions that matter, not revenge fantasies, not public humiliation schemes, not dramatic confrontations. Practical, strategic steps that protect you and position you for the best possible outcome. I got lucky in some ways. I had the resources to install surveillance. I had buddies who could help with reconnaissance. I had the money to hire an excellent attorney. I had a judge who was fair and saw the situation clearly. Not everyone has all those advantages, but everyone can approach their situation strategically instead of emotionally. Everyone can document what's happening. Everyone can seek professional legal help. Everyone can build their case before they make their move. The other lesson I learned is about trust. I'm not talking about never trusting anyone again. That's not healthy or realistic. I'm talking about trusting wisely, paying attention to red flags, listening to your instincts when something feels off, not ignoring problems because it's easier to pretend everything's fine. I ignored signs with Veronica, the complaints about deployment, the distance that developed. The way she seemed happier when I was gone than when I was home. I told myself it was normal adjustment stuff. It wasn't. Those were signs that she wasn't committed to the marriage the way I was. I should have addressed them directly instead of hoping they'd resolve themselves. Now I pay attention. If something feels wrong, I investigate. If someone's behavior doesn't match their words, I notice. I don't ignore red flags because acknowledging them is uncomfortable. Uncomfortable conversations are better than catastrophic betrayals. I also learned about the importance of protecting yourself financially. I'll never again have a joint account where another person has unrestricted access to my money. I'll never again be in a position where someone can spend my earnings while I'm unable to monitor the situation. Separate accounts, clear financial boundaries, transparency about spending. Those are non-negotiable for me now. Some people might think that sounds cynical or unromantic. I don't care. Romance doesn't pay the bills or protect your assets when a relationship implodes. Financial security and clear boundaries are loving things to maintain, both for yourself and for a partner who respects you. I'm 45 now. The divorce was finalized 3 years ago. I'm not the same person I was when I deployed for that contract. I'm harder in some ways, but also clearer about what I need and what I won't tolerate. I know my worth. I know what I bring to a relationship. And I know I'd rather be alone than be with someone who doesn't value those things. The military taught me a lot of skills. Combat tactics, strategic thinking, discipline, resilience. But the most valuable thing it taught me was that you can survive incredibly difficult situations if you stay focused on your objective and refuse to quit. That applied in combat. It applied during deployment. And it definitely applied during my divorce. Veronica and Blake thought they could get away with what they were doing because I was far away and vulnerable. They thought wrong. Distance didn't make me weak. It gave me perspective and time to plan. Being deployed didn't make me helpless. It motivated me to protect what was mine. When I walked into that house and saw their faces, I knew I'd already won. Everything that happened after that was just procedure. The court appearances, the property division, the financial settlements, all of that was just making official what had already been decided the moment I chose to handle this intelligently instead of emotionally. That's the real victory. Not the house or the money or even the favorable divorce decree. The real victory was maintaining my integrity and my strategic thinking even when I had every reason to lose control. I proved to myself that I could face betrayal and respond with strength instead of weakness. That's worth more than any asset I kept in the settlement. If you're going through something similar, that's my advice. Feel your feelings, but don't make decisions from that place. Get professional help, legal, financial, therapeutic, whatever you need. Document everything, build your case. And when you're ready, execute your plan with precision and confidence. You're not being vindictive. You're not being cruel. You're being smart. You're protecting yourself the same way you'd protect yourself in any other hostile situation. And there's nothing wrong with that. You owe loyalty to people who are loyal to you. When someone proves they're not loyal, you don't owe them anything except exactly what the law requires you to provide. I sleep well at night. My conscience is clear. I didn't cheat. I didn't lie. I didn't break my vows. I did my job, sent money home, and expected the bare minimum of fidelity and respect from my spouse. When I didn't get that, I responded appropriately and decisively. No regrets. 3 years later, I'm building something better. A life based on clear values and strong boundaries. A career that challenges me without compromising my well-being. Friendships with people who have proven themselves trustworthy. And eventually, when the time is right, maybe a relationship with someone who actually understands what commitment means. Until then, I'm good, I'm whole, I'm successful, I'm respected. And I got here by refusing to be a victim and choosing instead to be strategic, patient, and relentless in protecting what was mine. That's the story, that's the lesson. That's how you turn betrayal into victory.